Chapter 15. One of Powell's supporters arrived right after Wilkes and Billy, also armed with a carbine. Between the two of them, they had no trouble capturing the 4 men and 1 woman, whose transponders ID'd them as Spears' loyalists. At least, according to Powell. Wilkes didn't much like trusting the Major, but in this case, the choice was easy enough. At least Powell wasn't homicidal. "What's the scat, Sarge?" one of the captured troops said. "Changing of the guard," Wilkes answered. "To keep it simple, here's the drill. Spears is out, Powell is in. Any problems with that?" The 5 troopers glanced around, and at the weapon Wilkes held across his chest in port arm ready position. "You're breaking a few regs here, Sarge," one of the women said. "Spears will cut you a new asshole." "Yeah? Well, how long you figure before you trip over one of those regs and wind up feeding the general's little pets?" Wilkes asked her. "You know some of the people webbed in there, don't you?" He waved at the reinforced wall to his left. The Queen's chamber was on the other side. He could see them weighing it. If Spears came back and assumed command, they would be in deep shit if they played along with this. He was not a forgiving man. On the other hand, if Powell was the new honcho in charge, he wouldn't give them to the aliens. A smart Marine would sit tight and wait to see which way the current flowed. Then again, Wilkes thought, a smart Marine would have figured out that it was only a matter of time before they all went into the chambers as protein supplies for Spears' new and improved troops. Like the 3 who deserted and ran, only to find themselves out of the intake and into the combustion chamber. And it wasn't as though Colonial Marine line troopers were galaxy-renowned for their high intelligence. Then again, he had the gun. Even a stupid Marine usually figured that possibly dying in the future was better than for sure dying right now. "Looks like it's your show, Sarge," one of them said. "That it is. Let's take a little stroll to assembly. What say?" The lights blinked out, followed by the sound of pressure doors dropping into place. That would be Beulah. The emergency lighting popped on almost immediately. Half a second, no more. Unfortunately, that half a second was enough time for the largest of the troopers to think that he could take advantage of the darkness. He jumped at Wilkes. Wilkes' first reaction was to shoot the sucker. He was big, but slow, and he had plenty of time to cap one off into the man. But blowing away Marines, however misguided their sense of duty, didn't appeal much to somebody who'd spent most of his life in the Corps. He'd done it before. He hadn't liked it. Wilkes sidestepped to his left, swung his foot up in a spring kick, caught the charging man high in the belly. Stole his wind just long enough for the second kick, this one to the man's right leg, next to his knee. The attacker's leg buckled, the ligaments and cartilage torn, and he collapsed onto the deck, cursing. The Powell loyal trooper brought his weapon to eye level and prepared to fire on the other captured troopers. "Negative!" Wilkes yelled. "Don't shoot! There's no need." The armed man glanced at Wilkes. "My men are in control of life support," Wilkes said, making it up as he went along. "If anything happens to me, you lose heat and air. You're bottled up here without the exit codes. Anybody want to choke to death? Taking me out is the way to do it." To prove he wasn't worried, he lowered his own weapon. The 4 troopers still standing looked at each other uneasily. It was one thing to catch a round in battle and go fast, another to lie on the floor sucking air that had gone foul with CO2. Not a pleasant way to die. "Nobody's going to do nothing, Sarge. You call it." "That's good. Help Bimbo Boy up, and let's move." The 4 moved to help the wounded Marine. Well, so far so good. He hoped it would all go so easy. Wilkes seemed to have things well planned and under control, Billy saw. As they moved through the station, Wilkes used a magnetic card and a keypad code to open the pressure doors. Once, there were 3 men waiting on the other side of a door, but Wilkes herded some of the captives through first, their hands raised to advise the Marines of the situation. The threat was simple. Surrender your weapons or freeze in the dark trying to breathe. He must have forgotten that he was going to give Billy a gun, because she hadn't collected one yet. Not that there were many guns around. A couple of carbines, some pistols from various guards. Apparently, Spears didn't like his men running around the base armed. Probably a good idea. It would have been too tempting to take a shot at him. By now, they had collected about 30 people, about half of them loyal to Spears, according to Wilkes, who seemed to know how to tell the difference with some kind of electronic device he carried. Interesting. "Where are we going?" Billy asked him. "Central Assembly," he said. "Got to sort these guys out as to ours and his. Powell says there are 175 Marines, 48 scientists and medicos and a couple of androids, and 15 work bots here. Spears has a short platoon, 25 men, with him. We can't have anybody running around loose who might short-circuit things." "A lot of people to find," she said. "Couple of hundred and then some." "Used to be more. Powell says there were almost 500 Marines assigned to this base. Want to guess where the other half of them went?" Billy swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "Between them and the colonists, Spears has given the aliens more than 400 people. God, more like the devil, I'd say. If I were inclined to believe in such things, kid." Billy blinked and thought about somebody who would give that many of his fellow humans up to such a horrible death. He had to be crazy. "Yeah, he's that," Wilkes said. She hadn't realized she'd spoken aloud. "But don't worry about it. We're going to shut it down. Powell says the medicos on his side know how to put the corralled aliens down fast. We can shut them off like lights." He snapped his fingers. "That quick. Soon as we get Spears' loyalists locked up, we turn this place into an alien graveyard. The air processing plant is a little harder, but we can work something out. Worst comes to worst, we'll just nuke the whole place." One of the captured Marines overheard this. You can't do that," she said. "The air plant is worth billions, and we need the oxy. Sister, this planetoid is a wash. Even if we cook the plant crispy, some of those things might be dug in. They can survive a long time without food, without water, even without air. They could hibernate for years, just waiting for some fool to come along and be dinner. The best we can do is kill all those we can spot and then bail out. On sterile ships, too. You'd let the whole Earth be overrun by these things and destroy the only means of combating them." Wilkes looked at the woman as if she'd grown fangs. "You buy that shit?" he said. "You think Spears is going to drop down and clean up the whole fucking planet with a couple of hundred tame monsters?" "He knows what he's doing," she said. Wilkes just shook his head. "Move, sister. You believe that? You're as crazy as he is." Spears had learned over the years that circumstances often dictated events in a way that was beyond human control. Since the magnetic storm had caught them, there was no help for it, save to make the best of the enforced grounding. He'd worked computer scenarios, painted new trooper IDs, and now stood in a makeshift shooting range, provided by an unused corridor with a soak plate at the end as a backstop. It wasn't state-of-the-art. No holographic attackers who would crumple and fall realistically when hit by computer-tuned and augmented weaponry. Still, it would serve. A trooper stood out of sight through an open doorway 10 meters down the corridor from where Spears was. With his pistol holstered, Spears called out, "Throw!" and went for his weapon. The hidden trooper tossed an industrial-sized food can into the corridor so it entered at eye level and climbed in a lazy arc towards the high ceiling. The can was bright red plastic, as big as a small wastebasket, and it rose slowly in the reduced gravity of the corridor. A micromanagement of G was possible if you had a good programmer working the generators, and plenty of time on his hands to route the flux lines. Spears fired. The caseless round punched into the can as it reached its apex. In the lowered gravity, the impact of the starfish round as it expanded and tripled in caliber size was enough to knock the can noticeably away from the general. He punched the can twice more as it tumbled away and downward. The faint odour of canned fruit reached him as syrup and fruit cocktails spewed from the holes in the plastic. The booms of the pistol filled the corridors, but Spears' hearing was protected by in-canal wolf ears, electronic suppressors that allowed normal sounds in but stopped anything over 80 decibels. "Good shooting, sir," the unseen Marine said. Spears chuckled. Cat shit. A half-blind soldier should be able to hit a target that big at this range. "Use the smaller one next time. Ready? Throw!" More booms lapped against the walls as his shots found the next target, a head-sized can of yellow plastic. Spam, it looked like. Now that wasn't bad shooting. In the main assembly area, Powell came to join Wilkes and Billy and the others. "Major?" "We've got all of Spears' men here except for those he's got with him," Powell said. "You've lost it, Major," a top kick said. "The General will wipe the floor up with you and your mutineers when he gets back." "Maybe, Top, but I'll risk that. I'm going to give you all a choice," he said. "Those of you who wish to remain loyal to General Spears and his demented vision, move over to the left, there. Those of you who will obey my orders until we can consult SETCOM and get an official review of the situation, assemble on the right, by the aft wall." The docks and ship bays were much larger, but this room was the biggest space normally used for general assemblies. The 200 or so people rumbled, a disorganized crowd waller, as they spoke to each other and to nobody. "Powell's lost his fucking mind. I don't want to wind up feeding the bastards. What's the legal scat here, Sarge? We're fucked either way. Ah, hell, I'll go with the Major." Wilkes watched as the men, women, and androids chose sides. The bots didn't count. They weren't AI grade. The androids had no choice, really. They were programmed to obey the ranking officer, and since Spears was gone, that was Powell. The human group gradually divided into roughly equal numbers, moving towards each side of the room. Most of the scientists went with Powell. Maybe their exposure to the aliens had taught them something. More enlisted troops went to the aft wall too, while the line officers, a couple of captains and lieutenants, and most of the NCOs went to the Spears group. That figured. Sergeants mostly ran the day-to-day operations of any military organization, and they trusted more in the military process than did the grunts. Officers usually stuck together because they were officers. "I can't believe so many would still follow him," Powell said softly. "Hell, I can't believe you got so many," Wilkes said. "What will we do with them?" "Put them in detention. It'll be a little crowded, but they'll just have to make do." "What about the crossovers?" "We'll keep them supervised," Powell said. "Outside of you and a few others, there aren't any of them I would trust with a weapon just yet." Wilkes nodded. "I hear that." "All right. You men and women on the aft wall, return to your normal stations. You'll be reassigned shortly. Keep your comms open. You'll get a computer log telling you where to report. We'll be a little thin, but we can keep things running." Billy said, "What about the General?" "Yeah," Wilkes put in. "Do you have any anti-skycraft weaponry mounted in this base?" "Negative," Powell said. "We didn't expect attack from that quarter. Some of the crawlers and the hoppers carry light machine guns, 20mm EU slug cannons. Enough to bring down a small troop carrier," Wilkes said. "Better get somebody you trust who can shoot suited up and into battery. PDQ. The best way to stop Spears is to knock him down before he knows he's in trouble." "I would prefer to capture him," Powell said. "With all due respect, Major, as long as Spears is alive, he's dangerous. If he gets back here, into the base, he's got an army the same size as yours. Plus, he's got personal control of the aliens, isn't that right? You said the Queens recognize him, didn't you?" Powell took a deep breath. "That's correct. I don't like taking out Marines. I've had to do it in the past, and I would rather not. But this is what you hired me for, isn't it? The hot work." Powell closed his eyes, nodded, resigned. "Yes. Fine. You run your base, Major. I'll take care of Spears." The man nodded again, and Wilkes turned away. He wouldn't order anybody to shoot the general, but he would stand aside and let Wilkes do it. Fine, whatever it took. "Come on, Billy. I'd feel better if you stuck with me." "What about Bueller?" "He's okay. He's standing by the life support controls until we're sure what's what." "Where are we going?" "To give Spears a welcome home party. Once he's gone, we're going to put all his pet monsters to sleep." Billy shook her head. "Thank God." "Whoever. Let's go."